Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Level Up Roundtable. I'm Erin, also known as Breakfast Candy, and today we'll be talking about design experiences for players age 13 plus with 5 fabulous developers and Roblox's own Dan, aka Douchebav. Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Erin, and welcome again, everyone, to Level Up. We're really excited to have you all here today. I have some amazing panelists joining me, so I'm just going to go ahead straight away and introduce them one by one. Joining us first from ROLVe, we have Krystal and Ivan. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, what's up, everyone?
All right, Krystal, Ivan, this is always my favorite part of the show. I need you all to flex your Roblox street cred. How long have you guys been on the platform? Krystal, starting with you.
So I've been on the platform since roughly 2010, but I got rebranded to MidnightKrystal in 2013. And I've been working with ROLVe since 2017.
Yeah. I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself here. I mentioned ROLVe. What games have you guys made on Roblox?
Ivan, would you like to
Sure.
talk about that?
Well, we made a lot, but definitely the two that we're best known for are Arsenal. That's our number one, and Counter Blocks as well. That's another one of ours. And then we have like 50 others, but those are definitely the two biggest ones.
Yeah, so that's a DevRel favorite. We play that often in the office, and there's definitely some people who take it very seriously.
Oh, that's great. I'm honored. People are sweating over the game. Yes.
All right, Ivan, street cred time. How long have you been on the platform? How did you get started in game development? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been on Roblox since 2009, so I was 8 years old when I got started. And I've been working with ROLVe since 2014. And I just got started by building levels, building maps, really. That was the beginning to everything. I mean, from learning how to build maps, I learned how to build like guns and stuff because we make gun games a lot. So I learned how to do that. And then I learned how to do some animation from that, just from having the right team and everything. So just gradually over time, just being told to take care of stuff just kind of forced me to learn the tools a little bit better. And it's been a really good experience so far. Like, I'm absolutely honored to be able to do this.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. And for those that don't know, whenever you see a sweet Arsenal trailer, that's usually you, Ivan, right? You're the one that's putting
That's right. That's right. I direct those trailers and animate them sometimes.
Awesome.
Most of the time.
Well, thanks again, Krystal, Ivan, for joining us. Can't wait to pick your brain on aged up content today. Moving on to our next team, joining us from Looty Games. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the work that you've done.
Sure, yeah. So my first job in the games industry was at Blizzard, where I worked on Diablo 3 for about 7 years. But also I've been building games since I was 7 or 8 years old, but there was no Roblox when I was a kid, so I'm kind of a boomer now. You know what I mean? Then after Blizzard, I joined Riot, where I worked on R&D, worked on a little bit of League of Legends, saw a lot of projects there. It was really cool. And so our little team has been building Roblox games for about almost a year now. And our game that we're working on right now is called Ruin. So it's currently in development.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned something there that resonates with me. I'm super jealous of everybody growing up now that has access to Roblox, because for us boomers growing up, I had like Notepad that I was like programming out of at one point, and ActionScript and Flash and everything. Right. So it's
100%. It was very hard.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Can't wait to talk to you about Ruin and some of the great work that your team is doing. Finally on our list here today from the Frontlines team, Nick and Clarence. Clarence, starting with you, please introduce yourselves. Flex your street cred a little bit.
Hey, how's it going, guys? My name's Clarence. I've been with Roblox since 2009. I'd say, when everyone was just playing Lumber Tycoon and Shark Sea, Zombie Tycoon. And so, over the years, I've been like building a few games, breaking a lot of things mostly, with like build, survive, and fight, or like those obbies and game modes and stuff. But, I haven't really started making, I guess you'd call professional games until like 4.5 years ago with Operation Scorpion. And I'm currently working on Frontlines with Nick here as the creative lead.
Awesome. Nick, I didn't introduce you before. Could you please tell us, who you are and what you do on the Frontlines team?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nick. I've been on Roblox since 2012. playing games, what have you. Right now I'm just the lead programmer for Frontlines. So yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Frontlines? Like, what is it about?
Yeah, sure. So, Frontlines was actually a pivot from Operation Scorpion. We realized that super tactical, I guess, like realistic shooter didn't really work out at Roblox. People are getting frustrated that it couldn't spawn in all the time. And the slow paced gameplay didn't help with it either. So we decided to make this fast paced arcade shooter more so where you're kind of just like running, gunning, you're spawning in all the time. It's an adrenaline rush. And on top of that, we try to add in this like blockbuster movie cinematics into the gameplay. So, it's really realistic in terms graphically instead of like gameplay wise. And we try to make it into almost like an action movie that all players could enjoy.
Awesome. Well, I really want to set the pace today for our aged up panel and really just showcase some of the awesome work each of our teams have been doing. So Clarence, that was sort of a great introduction here. Can we show a little bit of Frontlines? I believe we have a video.
Yeah, go for it. Excited to see what you guys think of it.
Awesome. When can we expect that to be out and available to everybody, Clarence?
Oh man, that's a hard question. I get that all the time. Sometimes I tell people it's a month and then realize there's delays. So we're just like, I just learned to just tell people that it's coming soon now.
Yeah.
But I'd say a safe estimate is Christmas. We're really trying to hit that Christmas deadline when everybody gets out of school.
Okay. So we'll
know.
leave it at soon TM. Is that
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
TM, pretty
Okay.
much.
All right. Arsenal, over to you guys. Could you tell us a little bit more about your game for those living under a rock and have never opened up Roblox before? What is Arsenal about? And maybe can we showcase a video for that as well?
You want to take it, Krystal?
Yeah, sure. So Arsenal can really be best described as a fast-paced, really easy to pick up Twitch shooter based around deadly, wacky, and even crummy weapons. So you can go from bananas to M60s to anything in your imagination.
Awesome. Do you have a specific gun that you all are
Favorite guns? Is that what we're asking?
Yeah, favorite guns.
Favorite
Ooh.
guns? Mine is the candy cane mini gun, which is a
Yes!
barreled mini gun.
Yes, that's actually my favorite as well.
It's got
Let's
like,
go.
doesn't it have like 500 shots and it just does
Yeah.
not stop shooting?
No, it's just hellfire. It's awesome.
Perfect. All right, Chris, we mentioned Ruin, but we didn't really talk about it. Can you tell us a little bit about Ruin, what it's about, and then we can show everybody a few images from it.
Yeah, for sure. We love, obviously my background is in action RPG style games, top-down camera, think Diablo. But we love like PvP and that kind of combat. So imagine a Diablo style game that's really focused on PvP with abilities and, kind of easy controls and so on and so forth. So that's really the vision for that. So it's like super, I don't know, Diablo with PvP basically is really kind of what you think of. So you kill guys, loot drops, you can smash barrels, you get loot out of that stuff. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of coins on the ground. I love that stuff. It's like, it's super sticky to me. As soon as I play any game that has that stuff, I'm immediately like hooked, so we got all that kind of stuff in the game.
Yeah. Anything with damage numbers and stats and builds, I'm right there for as well. Yeah, Mr. Excel over here. That's awesome. Well, enough talking and introducing. Let's hop on in to our discussion today. We're going to be talking about aged up games that are more mature or are for a more mature audience. And I want to toss this one out to the panel. Feel free to hop in if you want to answer. But have any of you designed games for younger audiences before? And if you have, what is the difference that we're talking about here with aged up games? Like what is about the content of older experiences that attract older audiences?
I don't think that any of us here at ROLVe personally have worked on a game intentionally designed for a younger audience. Our age range has always been roughly around our own personal age ranges, that being from when we started working around 15 years old to, now in our 20s and such. But I can say for sure from experience, at least, that one of the biggest differences between working for a younger audience and an older audience is that an older audience is able to make do with less, whereas a younger audience needs more explanation and description before they can hop into something. Like if you hand a older player such as myself a unplayed FPS that just released, having played so many other first-person shooters in my life, my first immediate reaction is spacebar is jump, WASD is move, and I know what the shoot button's going to be. Whereas a kid might press shift and go, why am I not sprinting? And then quit the game because it's not what they expect.
So as a developer, what are some of the ways that you build off of your players' knowledge and experience, or how do you leverage that sort of built-in knowledge that your players have?
So when it comes to that kind of stuff, one of the things I really like to put into effect is just options upon options. Typically what you can do is you can, like you mentioned personally before when we were talking about tutorials and how they're usually received poorly. Tutorials are something I can help a younger audience, but are completely unrequired for an older audience. That's why when somebody loads up a game, rather than having mandatory tutorials, you have opt-in tutorials. And if you really want an older audience to play it, you can promote a reward of some kind, but ideally it's something that's optional. In one of our games, Typical Colors 2, our programmer Anarchy introduced this system where if you are a new player, important objectives and such like capturing the point or capturing a flag are highlighted and spoken to you through message tooltips. But that's something you can just turn off. So as an older player, you know that where the settings are located, you will find it, you'll know that you can turn it off.
Okay, awesome. Ivan, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I guess the biggest takeaway really for me with more aged up designing versus lower age designing, at least like what I notice is really prevalent, is there's a lot more involvement, I would say, like direct involvement with like skill-based gameplay and stuff. Like I feel like that's really a huge appeal for a lot of the older masses, including us. Like Krystal said earlier, when we were making games for like our own age group at the time when we started, which was about 15 years old, we're definitely all about that like competitive skill-based, like, oh, I have to like precisely move my mouse to hit targets and win, basically. Versus I would say like younger games in general are more like on a role play aspect, I would say, or it's not so direct. It's not so like I'm competing with direct skill. I'm doing more like I'm like trying to level up stuff by maybe just clicking things, or it's not like aiming and trying to like do headshots or something like that. It's a little easier than that, I would say. So
yeah, well, that's interesting. If I could sort of connect the dots between your 2 points, Krystal was really talking about how players are coming in with this built-in knowledge, and you're mentioning sort of the competitive aspect. So in a way, you could kind of think about how for older audiences, they really want to build on and improve upon the knowledge that they have on the game in order to be better, in this case, than other players in the game, right? Yeah. Well, Chris, this is your first experience that you're creating on Roblox, and obviously from your resume of the past of Diablo 3, there is a line here, and that is that it seems like you're very interested in creating these experiences for older audiences. Could you talk about that a little bit, and maybe the decision to make something on Roblox that's also for an older audience as well?
Well, the decision to work on Roblox was pretty simple for me. I mean, the mission in my life is to create the world's greatest games. And I think that right now, all of the innovation in games is happening on Roblox. Like, I consistently play Roblox games that totally blow my mind in terms of execution and just level of fun. And it's so easy to play with your friends. So that's sort of the impetus, right? There's just so much innovation happening. It's crazy. So aged up, like I've been reading some, like to prep for this, I've been reading some psychology books, and the guy that pretty much covers this the best is Jean-Paul Piaget. And he has these kind of 4 stages of childhood development and play. And by the time he's got this really famous kind of example, and I thought it was super interesting, I'm going to relay it here. But he would give kids of different ages the task of balancing a scale with weights, right? And on one end, he would put a bunch of weights in, and on the other end, he would leave it empty and wait for the kid to put the weights on the scale with the proper amount to balance the scale, right? And it wasn't until the kids reached about the age of 13 where they were able to create a conceptual model of how many weights I should put on this scale before trying to put any weight on the scale. So they would think about how many weights needed to go on it to balance it and then put the weights on. Whereas before that age, 10 and under, what they would do is just trial and error, just start putting stuff on the scale and figure it out through kind of a tactile learning experience. And so I think that when you look at how to age it up, I think you really extrapolate that out upwards, and you think like it's exactly what the Arsenal dudes are saying. It's like that complexity, right? Like take Arsenal's an amazing product. Take Warzone, like Call of Duty Warzone, for example. They have advanced movement mechanics, very advanced. You can slide, you can use blockers in the environment. You spawn in with a parachute that you can cut at any time. You have multiple weapons you can swap through. There's a long respawn timer. The level of input and complexity is much higher. And I would wager that the age group for Warzone is also much higher because of that, right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some of my thoughts.
No, I mean, that's very interesting. How would you say that sort of translates into, I guess, like the games that you make, right? Obviously, you're talking about like you have your basic controls for a shooter and then you have extra layers of complexity, but like, how does that differ from if a 10-year-old's picking up a game and how they're going to sort of go about it versus, you know, somebody who's a little bit older?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, you know, the games that we make have to have a rich complexity to the gameplay itself, first of all. And unless it's a sort of a, like, think about a simulator game, because we build combat games where you smash crates and loot flies out, right? Like, but a simulator game is similar in some ways. And it's not the input complexity that makes a simulator game appeal to an older audience. What you would do is you would have a very rich and layered sort of meta system that sits on top that has complex interactions with different resources and such that you have to manage as a player, right? So that you can optimize the rate at which you're getting your dopamine hits, you know, right? I mean, that's how the approach would be. And so for us, what that looks like is, you know, we have like a left click and a right click and a dash in our game, but honestly, I feel like the mastery curve is too low, right? And so if the mastery curve is too low, it just, the player's going to come in, feel like they've already got a great, they feel like they've mastered it too quickly and they're not going to stick around. So I think that that's a huge component. Whereas like baseline, like Arsenal, just the aiming and shooting is already enormously complex, right? And this mastery curve on that is extremely high, as evidenced by the fact that I can't get a single kill in Arsenal without dying at least 10 times. You know what I mean? It's insane how good people are at that game.
Yeah, it's definitely that people are good and not that I'm terrible at shooters. I promise. Yeah, no, but I totally agree with you. And that's a very interesting point because we see it all the time where you'll see like a simulator pop up into the top 10 and then over time it'll dwindle and sort of disappear. And part of that is because it's very successful initially because it's easy to pick up. There's a lot of trial and error and you can get into the loop quickly. But when you're taking a look at like an older audience, right? Once you get through that surface level, older players are starting to look for, okay, what's the next layer of complexity, or what's the next way that I can sort of master this or build upon my knowledge of it or get better at it. And oftentimes a lot of simulators sort of fall short on that, but the ones that are successful in that are the ones that tend to last longer on the platform. So I think that's an incredible point that you just made. Clarence, for Frontlines, you know, we were just talking about shooters and we're also talking about tone. You know, in what ways do you think about for your game, how you create that for an older audience to sort of get into and enjoy versus, you know, if you're trying to create it for a younger one.
Yeah, sure. So I'd first like to just build off from what Chris said about complexity and mechanics. I completely agree on that because you know, players are always trying to progress. I know for Operation Scorpion, there's a whole competitive clan league where they try to like have skirmishes every weekend and they try to get better, whether or not it's aim training or movement training. They have like lane training. So they have all these like different like mechanics that I as a developer don't even know about. You know, they're creating their own mechanics themselves. So in Frontlines, I know we added a lot of movement actionable things that players could do, like sliding, tactical sprinting, and so on. And players are already coming up with combos, you know, like, oh, you have to jump first, then you sprint, then you slide, then you sidestep. So I do completely agree that, you know, complexity and progression definitely matters. But right now, I think our biggest challenge is really balancing out between having that high complexity versus like new players trying to join in. Because now there's like these super advanced players who's been practicing all those skills all the time, you know, getting really good and are completely dominating the new players that don't know how to use those skills at all. So although the players could jump in and, you know what to do right away, they might not have fun because, you know, the older players or the more advanced players are completely annihilating them. So that's something that we're still trying to figure out. And, you know, we're still in the process of that. But I guess like to add on more on top of this, like older versus younger audience topic is the one thing I notice a lot about the difference between the two is that older audiences tend to have a bigger expectation for quality in the game. You know, they tend to notice it more. Whereas, you know, the younger kids who are trying to play Frontlines tend to just be happy that they got access to it. Like, oh man, you know, I got access to this like, you know, private unreleased game. Like, you know, I'm just gonna have fun. Whereas the older audiences are very critical about like about the game itself. Like, hey, you know, this prop on the side doesn't look too well. Why is the texture kind of blurry? Or why does the movement feel a bit clunky on this side of the map, you know? Or I guess like one of the biggest criticisms I know we get a lot from older players are the FPS rates that they get. You know, I know like a lot of people on Roblox uses FPS unlockers to try to get like that 300 FPS, 400 FPS for the super smooth gameplay experience. But, you know, building an aged up experience on Roblox tends to make that really hard because, you know, with the higher graphics that we put into the game, the higher quality put into the game, the more of an FPS drop that most players would get. So, you know, that's also something that we're working on.
So what you're trying to say is that younger players are going to love you for who you are while older players are shallow and care about how you look. Is that right?
Pretty much. You know, I'd say the younger kids just want to have fun and we try to make the game as fun as possible for them.
Yeah. Well, I know another coworker has a kid and he plays Roblox with him all the time. And, you know, that behavior that you guys are talking about really resonates where he's in the game, actually playing the game. And his son, who's about 6 years old, is kind of off in the corner role playing with himself. So he's not like truly playing the actual experience that was created there. But, you know, he's having a great time. He's happy to be there, sort of a thing. So I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. And it's definitely true and it definitely resonates. So so I wanted to move on and I wanted to ask, you know, we were comparing and contrasting, you know, older to younger audiences, but for any of you in your experience, is there overlap here? Like, what are some of the things that work across all age groups? Because obviously there are games out there, you know, elsewhere in the industry, Mario, Animal Crossing, that appeal to wide ranges of audiences. So like, what are some of those core elements that can resonate across different groups?
I'd say a big one is, especially in FPS, it's the power to pop off. Any competitive game, giving the user the feeling of a power trip or the idea that they're doing it extraordinarily well is a huge thing that all players of almost any age really enjoy. The feeling of being, not just the feeling of being good, but being clever, being able to absolutely dominate a server, you know, or as most people call it, everybody likes the pub stomp.
Yeah. Is there differences there? I know we're comparing. It sounds like at least in my experience, right? Power for younger audiences is getting 99999 of something, or, you know, being able to do a big flashy move. Whereas like, you know, we were talking about skill before, right? For older audiences, that power boost might, yes, flashy things are definitely great, but also sort of slowly earning and acquiring the skill to sort of be able to do that, right?
Personally, for me, when it comes to older audiences, what I like to believe, just based on like who I've watched, the people I've researched, and like the different content I've taken in, older audiences like to do the most stupidest thing in the stupidest way and have it work.
That's
Gotta love 'em.
They'll always find a way to do something insanely stupid. Like,
Yeah.
for example, trick shots in Call of Duty, where they would jump off a building, spin around 30 times, and then shoot somebody. Team Fortress 2, market gardening and tripping. You're using a rocket that deals no damage just to hit somebody with a funny spoon.
Yeah.
So I think in terms
Pretty
of
spot
the
on.
experiences that all age groups can enjoy, I immediately start thinking about, say, like Pixar movies,
Yeah.
right?
That's a
And
great, yeah.
Pixar movies, like, because what we do is entertainment, right? And there's a lot of overlap. And so Pixar movies are and approachable at many different layers, right? Like, you don't have to appreciate the complexity of the relationship between Sully and, you know, gosh, what's the other guy's name? Mike
Wazowski.
Mike
Wazowski, yeah.
Wazowski.
Like, there's a lot going on there, and the relationship between those guys and their boss, and like all the work relationships. And that's a layer that the younger audience won't really pick up on, won't be able to relate to, but still can enjoy the movie. And I think that games are the same way. And when you look at, like, say, Lego Star Wars, which is like one of my favorite games, I think that really does have that broad appeal. I think it's, you know, like, to your example of the 6-year-old that just wants to play around. I mean, that's a well-studied, well-understood experience. That's the way they want to play. And you'll need to have a game, a part of the game that allows for that kind of play, that simultaneous playground experience. Like, if you go to a playground and you watch kids in that age group, they're playing, but they're not playing structured games with structured rules.
Yeah.
And I think that's the, like, having those layers in there, I think, is going to be crucial, and not having those layers stomp on each other, which is why it's so hard to do. And I think why so few games actually manage to accomplish it.
Yeah.
And it's why, like, the games that really do it are the ones that, you know, they come out of Nintendo, because Nintendo's process for the way they greenlight games is, like, incredibly vigorous.
Mhm.
It's incredibly vigorous. And I think that it allows for those sorts of emergent mechanics to kind of reveal themselves as you're making the product, I guess. Yeah.
If we were to take the Pixar analogy and sort of apply it to Ruin, right? Let's say a 30-year-old and a 6-year-old hop into your game. What are they doing that can appeal to both of them and they can have a good time?
Well, nothing right now. I think the 6-year-old is going to get absolutely destroyed unless I don't think they're going to understand it. I think they're going to get just totally destroyed. And I think that for us, it's like, are we trying, you know, we're a small team, we have limited resources, right? So it's like, if we were Nintendo, we would be hitting that hard. But I think for us, it's like, we got to target our market, right? We got to target what we think our customer is, and just focus on that, because trying to go too broad is going to spread our resources thin. And I think it's just too much of a risk. So that's our approach. You know what I mean? It's kind of based on resources.
If I could play devil's advocate, I could argue that the younger player would have a great time killing trash mobs, because there's very little resistance and they could feel like powerful with that, while your older players are actually trying to do the objective.
That is 100% true. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're ever in a competitive game and you're like, why is my one teammate over there? Like, what are they doing? Maybe they're like 6 years old and they're just having the time of their lives, you know? So, but I think that applies to everyone here, right? Like for the ROLVe team, right? In Arsenal, I could think of, like, for a younger player, I think they would just have a blast playing with the candy cane minigun, right? Like, they're not really focused on getting high score or pub stomping or something like that. So there's a little bit of fun there for them too, right?
I mean, yeah, that's why I like the cartoon theme so much, to be honest. Like, it's I mean, I love all game shapes and sizes, but I'm one of those people that, you know, has been playing games for such a long time that I have had the time to see everything. But I have noticed, like, in the cartoon world, I guess there's such a wide range of what you can do in that world, and it seeming plausible to the audience. You know, those cartoon style shooters like Team Fortress, for example, you know, it's very toon like, and I see little kids and adults play that game too. And you can like rocket jump, and, you know, like, you can't do that in real life or anything like that. You probably won't see like a realism style shaded game really do like rocket jump. So you probably won't see as like little kids as inclined to try it. But, you know, like like going off of that Pixar analogy earlier, I think that's a perfect example to describe that. Cause I mean, it just seems like such a plausible universe for both age groups. Like, they both can relate somehow to it. And I think it's a fun type of game to work on for sure. I love cartoons.
Yeah. Well, I think so. That's an interesting point. And, you know, Chris, you brought up that ultimately for you had to pick a lane and pick an audience that you're going for. So it might not always be the correct answer to try and make, you know, something that appeals to everybody. Nick and Clarence, for you guys, you know, when I think of your game, yours is probably the most focused in terms of the audience that you're going for. So could you talk about that sort of decision a little bit, and, you know, how you kind of make that the experience that is targeting that audience?
Yeah, very much. So, you know, we kind of like started off making games on Roblox for older audiences. So it's just like, I guess, our background. We make games for, like, you know, players 16 and up. And so most of our experience lies there. And us ourselves, you know, outside of Roblox, we play games like The Last of Us, you know, Grand Theft Auto, Modern Warfare, you know, games that you'd consider for older audiences. So a lot of our gaming experience too is on games for older audiences. So I'd say a lot of our interest lies there. And, you know, we're mostly making Frontlines because we love the idea and we love what we're doing. So we don't really have like this almost like business plan where, like, okay, like, how can we design a game for an older audience, or like, how can we design a game for this specific demographic? We're kind of just making Frontlines for us. You know, it's something that we like to play ourselves. So, you know, we don't really have that like analytical thought, I guess, that your question might be wanting an answer for, because, like, you know, our analytical thought is like, oh, do we like the game? So yeah. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure, yeah.
I just want to say that when you brought up the example of GTA, believe it or not, that is actually a selling point for a younger audience, because having that inaccessibility to games that are supposedly quote unquote older for older audiences and stuff, like your Devil May Cry, your Grand Theft Auto, your Saints Row, that adult area of video games actually attracts younger audiences as well, because it's kind of like a forbidden fruit. So even if you do have that mentality of, oh, this is designed for an older audience, you will attract a younger audience as well from that alone.
That's a great point. Nick, so bringing you into, you know, this topic here, for you working on Frontlines, Clarence was just talking about how you guys are making a game for yourself. Like, what were some of the inspirations for Frontlines that really sort of motivate you in the content that y'all are creating?
I'd say some of the main motivations for us is just like AAA FPS games. We want to create something we want to prove basically that we can make something as good as Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, or Battlefield on Roblox. That's basically sort of our mentality when we develop Frontlines.
From a programming and a development perspective, you know, what are some of the challenges, you know, you're really going for it? You're trying to make the highest fidelity, the best looking thing possible. And obviously there's some challenges there. Could you highlight like what that is and why it's worth it to create the experience that you're trying to make?
I'm sorry, can you ask that one more time?
Sure, yes. So I was saying, you know, obviously we have some images up here and they're absolutely beautiful. And when you're creating this content for an older audience, you know, it does demand that it's more technically proficient. that it looks beautiful. So like, what are some of the challenges in creating this kind of an experience versus some of the other games you might find on Roblox, and why is it worth it?
I'd say one of the biggest challenges is performance, because you have to simultaneously manage making something which looks really good and is really like technically intensive, CPU intensive in terms of the code that needs to run to manage all the different complex systems which occur during gameplay, while simultaneously making it, run fast, look good. And once we like make that work, then that's basically just when the magic happens, and we create an experience that simultaneously runs well and looks good.
Do you have any tips or tricks for those at home on how you save on performance and other things like that?
I'd say for one, performance settings. So we have, in addition to Roblox's like in-game graphic settings, we have our own settings which allows people to turn off like certain props, certain lighting effects, that sort of thing, just to make things less visually intensive if they want to optimize for performance. But also from a code standpoint, like without getting too like technically into things, just making sure that everything is done in the most efficient way possible. Because even though like you can sort of budget a bit and allow something to be a little bit less optimized than it can be, like they really start to add up when you have a bunch of different complex systems. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, really excited to try the game when it comes out. I mean, it's looking incredible so far. So I don't know how many headaches or sleepless nights y'all have had putting this together, but it looks incredible. So
It was like 3 years of sleepless nights, Dan.
what's that?
It was 3 years of sleepless nights.
Oh, geez.
Working on it a lot.
But it'll be worth it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're super excited to share you guys like what we've made. I'd say a lot of the improvements have been made in like the past half a year. We pivoted a lot. Actually, if you consider like our development lifeline, we probably finished the game like 2 years ago. But then like we decided, it didn't really match up our standards. So we kind of like redid the game like almost 3 times now, and this is the version that we really like and is super excited to show the world. So
yeah. Well, that passion shows.
Yeah.
I mean, again, really excited to try it out. Moving on to our next topic here. Let's talk systems design. Are there any systems that you would identify that are critical or necessary, or certainly help your case in creating an experience for an older audience?
Yeah, here I have something to say about that one. I think a huge focus for us, and by system, I'm assuming you meaning like just like how the game is set up, like the type of gameplay it has, or or certain mechanics or systems that definitely
that
think
audiences are looking for.
An anti-pay-to-win system is really huge for us. At least that's what we found has resonated well with the community. Is when we have things where basically we give everybody an equal chance to be proficient in the game without really needing to buy anything necessarily. Because yeah, I mean, because if someone just completely wrecks you with something that they bought, I have seen it before in games before, often on Roblox, like just everywhere in general. It's been really frustrating, and it makes me not really want to play. But it feels good to be able to basically just, for the most part, the money spent kind of just goes into like cosmetics, and even then, offering some of those opportunities for people to still get some degree of customizability and individuality and be able to buy some things still without having to actually give us any Robux or anything like that, we think is, I think is pretty huge. And I think that really just goes a super long way for just the overall reputation of your game and how you view the community, how you view your game mechanics and what you want the future of your game to look like and everything like that.
Can I tag on to that?
Yes.
So when he brought up pay to win, I got really excited because it's actually a huge critical point in designing a game for a younger or an older audience. And the reason for that is because a younger audience will see a pay to win item and their immediate train of thought will be, if I get this item, I will be good at the game. Whereas an older player will see this item, get dunked on by it, and go, why am I spending time on this if I'm just going to get dunked on by the pay to win weapon? They're not going to want to buy it. They're going to hate the weapon. They're going to want it gone. They don't want it to be in the game in the first place. And when it comes to systems in particular, I actually talked about this in chat. I'm probably going to bring up Team Fortress 2 a lot just because it has so many good examples of the things I think are important in a structured video game. Providing older audience with complex mechanics is nice. However, I don't think it needs to be as upfront as people believe it needs to be. One of the greatest things about video games, especially with older players, is when they're provided simple tools that are easy to understand in the beginning, but actually have this huge hidden mechanism behind it that you can learn, discover, master, and constantly improve upon. And having these kind of shadow mechanics for people to find is one of the coolest aspects in a game.
Well, Chris, I see you nodding your head here. Did you want to add anything to that or any
I mean, I
thoughts?
love those mechanics. I mean, you know, at Blizzard, there was a phrase literally, which what he just said, which was easy to play, difficult to master. And it was a tenet of actually all the product design. So it's, I think it's a truism 100%, but my favorite mechanic of all time was, I'm old school. So I played a lot of Counter-Strike, and in Counter-Strike, in the OG Counter-Strike, you bunny hop, which was actually not an intended mechanic. And it made the game extra silly when you played it. It did not look like a realistic shooter at all because people were flying in the air at 600 miles an hour. But it added a level of like complexity to the game. Like not only did you have to aim and shoot, but you also had to aim, shoot, and successfully bunny hop. It was such an interesting idea, and it was interesting to me to see them not try to lean into maybe not exactly that mechanic because it was so silly, but like something like that you could really play in like old school games that probably nobody has heard of, but like Tribes had something like this. Of course, there's Rocket Jump, not an intended movement mechanic. The original Team Fortress, so old school Team Fortress had what they call conk grenades, concussion grenades. And if you watch the pros play, they would take the conk grenade would wave your cursor around in a predictable pattern. So and the pros ended up doing was memorizing that pattern. And when they got conk grenaded, it would look like if you watch them play, their cursor didn't move because they were automatically moving their hand. It had become muscle memory for them to compensate for the conk grenade. So I think that those sort of emergent mechanics are super crucial, but they're so hard to design. And it comes out of, at least from what I've seen, those things come out of an iterative process to game development, which is why a game like, you know, Diablo 3, for example, took 7 years to build, right? Because you're just constantly iterating and trying to make it as good as possible. And like, you get a mechanic sometimes that here's how you know when you're onto that sort of thing. People play your game, they experience an unexperienced mechanic, and then they laugh, right? That means they're having fun, or it's really stupid. It's one of the two. And so you got to figure out which one of the two it is, right? And then maybe lean into it.
Is it a bug that we need to fix, or is it one that we're going to leave in the game because now it's a feature?
Is it a bug or is it a feature? A younger player will ask why it happened. An older player will ask, how could I abuse this?
Yep, that's true. Well, we were just talking about players wanting to earn versus buy their way to the top. And Chris, I wanted to toss this over to you. For player progression, what are ways that you can allow players to sort of earn in your game?
Man, pay to win is such a dramatic topic these days, especially with Diablo Immortal coming out on mobile, right? Like to see I think it was a Korean company that really helped them flesh out their whole monetization schema. And as a result, they have this like incredible, what they call depth of spend. That's sort of what they would call it. Because they know that from the perspective of the developer, what they see is people with all sorts of different kinds of income will have different kinds of spending patterns. And some people will spend $40,000 a year just on wine, for example, whereas I spend $0 a year on wine because I don't like it. You know what I mean? Not only that, but I can't afford $40,000 a year worth of wine. at all, not even close, right? So it's way out, so I think that if you steel man their argument for designing those systems, you'll find that those are the sorts of arguments they're making. Like the higher income people want to be able to spend money to get, advance their progression through the meta system. So for us, like, we like players to just be able to earn everything. You should be able to earn it. And really how it works for us is if you want to unlock weapons faster, then you can unlock it faster. Like you can pay a little bit of Robux or whatever to unlock your weapons faster. And that's essentially how it works, And so if you would rather trade time like in game for money, then I think that's a fair trade. And hopefully like, kind of like another philosophy on this, I think when you're running any kind of business is like, whenever a customer gives you money in our game, in games, it's players, when a player gives you money, it's kind of like a token of trust that they're giving you, that they're trusting that I'm going to take that and make the game better or make an amazing experience for them, not take the money that they're spending, that they're giving the company, and then turn around and buy like a Lamborghini and drive around at 100 miles an hour. You know what I mean? And live like a reckless lifestyle. Like there's sort of an expectation about player spend and using and then doing that in a way that is good, I guess. But so yeah, we definitely like, and I play games all the time where you can speed up your progression. Man, I like that stuff. So that's what we do. You know what I mean? But there is the extreme end of the Diablo Immortal. You can spend, I don't know what the cap on spend in that game is. I know it's more than 150,000. And that's wild to me. I don't understand that, but I mean, I understand it. I'm not sure that that's the sort of thing I'd want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in a way, there's kind of a line you need to toe between, for some players, what's limited for them is their time, and for others, it's money. But you want to be able to give them both a path to success. It's when you go to the extreme of one versus the other that you can end up alienating and, in a way, not respecting your player in the way that you should, right?
And I think for me, like, especially like, if there's a game I really like the Blizzard games were a hallmark of this. Like you'd buy the game up front, right?
Yeah.
Like Diablo 2, which I played like 10,000 hours of. And like, I wanted to spend more money on that game. Do you know what I mean? Like I wanted to, but I couldn't, So I think there's that too. And like, if there's a developer I really love, I'll buy their product. I'll give them money because it's that trust. You know what I mean? It's like, take the money, just take my money, just make something cool. I think you want to allow for that and be the kind of developer who can create those experiences.
Yeah. I guess another way to put it, and I always say this to developers, is you want players to be spending out of fun, not out of necessity, right? You want basically that mindset that you just said is exactly where you win as a developer, is when the player's like, I'm spending because I'm enjoying this game and I appreciate this company, versus I'm spending because I can't compete otherwise and I'm going to lose. Right.
I think I have one more thing I want to say about it too, which is that like, it's like any interaction that you have with another person. If my goal is to get money from you, every single interaction you have with me is going to be toxic. Do you know what I mean? It's such a bad mentality, right? Yeah. And I think that when you're a developer, you have to be approaching this as like with the right mentality, right? And I think that will help guide your decision making. Like another great one is like, I want to be a great teammate, right? Well, I want my teammates to trust me, right? Everybody wants your teammates to trust me to work on a team project. Well, the real actually technique, so to speak, is to be trustworthy, right? Just be trustworthy all the time, as much as you can, because you can't control how other people are going to act. And I think that's the same mentality a developer has to have.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like any other business, right? You want a satisfied customer. You don't want to rip them off because, yeah, you might get their money that time, but they're not going to come back to your business. And it's the same thing in games where it's like you want them to be satisfied with their purchase and not.
And I will one last thing, and then I'll shut up. I feel if I was like king of the earth or whatever, this is not a real thing. But what I would do is I would just make the world's greatest games, give them away for free, every aspect of it, for like 40 years, and then sell t-shirts. That is what I would really do, because Blizzard almost had that. You know what I mean? And I remember there was a time when I got a special Blizzard shirt and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You know? And I think that is, if we could create that, that's the goal. That's the dream scenario, right? You truly have made something special when you do that.
Yeah. Okay, well, just to tie up that topic on progression and just talk about balance and difficulty here for a minute. With all these other systems in place, how do you ensure that your game remains balanced and that players feel like they have a fighting chance every time that they play?
Are you asking me or everybody?
Yeah, I'm asking you, Chris.
Oh, you're asking me. Wow, this is so hard. It's almost impossible. And I think it's like an aspiration that you're always moving towards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of techniques, it's like what we look at is everybody in the game getting it? Like, okay, so for a competitive game, is everybody in the game getting at least one kill? Or is it like one person is getting 99 kills and everybody else is starving to death and getting stomped, right? And I think that you want to move closer to everybody getting one kill, I think, and so I think how you do that, there's a lot of mechanisms you can put in place to do that. You could do like a kill streak mechanic in Call of Duty, for example. Like, you just have to get a certain number of kills and you're guaranteed eventually to be able to nuke the entire map. So it's like there's a floor to the amount of murdering you can do, right? And that will allow you to experience that power curve. So that's one way that games have tackled that. But yeah, we kind of look at, kill death ratio. Is it way out of whack? Because if it is, then most people aren't going to be having fun.
Yeah. Well, I want to throw this to the rest of the panel as well. The nightmare that is balance and difficulty in your game. Do you guys have any tips or tricks on how you can approach that for older audiences?
Consistency.
Could you elaborate?
One of the biggest things when it comes to competitive games is ensuring that the baseline of the game puts everybody on the same floor, like
a level playing field.
Yeah, the same playing field. Arsenal, for example, is an RNG gun game. Now, typically for a game that it revolves around RNG, one would expect we would just let it go and it will go crazy. But we don't do that. We make sure everybody has the same weapon order. So everybody's going to get a pistol, a sniper, a jack-o'-lantern, a spell book. Everybody goes through the same weapon. So if you pull a bad weapon, you don't feel that bad because everybody else is going to pull that weapon too. Something very important to older players is when things work and they work as expected. They like things to be almost absolutely consistent.
Yeah, that's a great point. Clarence and Nick, anything to add to that as well?
I do want to add on to the topic of progression in terms of gameplay design, and it's that one of the things that I noticed is that when players level up after certain times, it gets way too hard. Like, I know some games where it doesn't have a level cap and you can go up to infinity, but at around level 70 or 80, it takes maybe 4 or 5 days to just level up once, and players start getting bored because it takes 5 days of consistent gameplay for them to level up. So one of the things that we decided to do with our gameplay design is that it's always easier to get rewarded. When players first join in, it's super fun right away because they're leveling up all the time. It takes 2 kills to level up, for example. And we try to make that consistent where they're constantly getting rewarded. So in that scenario, they're not really worried too much about, balancing, I'd say, or a player coming into the game, they're not really thinking about why am I always getting killed? But they're more so kind of dissatisfied by the fact that they're constantly leveling up because it's so easy to level up. So we try to cover up that balancing dilemma by making things rewarding in other areas, if that makes sense.
I think when it comes to balancing, especially for a game that's more because it's very reliant on what kind of game you're doing. For example, a game like Frontlines is very reliant on the type of weapons you're provided. And there's this immediate fear of power creep, which is an issue we had with Unit and Unit Classified. We're having problems with that with our game enforcement right now because explosives seem to be a bit of a problem. But when it comes to stuff like that, it's typically very reliant on your game's time to kill, which is how fast users are capable of killing one another. Essentially, what you want to do is tweak weapons to fit a play style rather than just, changing things for the sake of changing it. The baseline weapons should be able to compete with weapons that are given later on, but the later on weapons can be used to customize the way a player, plays. For example, Enforcement has some starter weapons. You get M16 Springfield, double barrel shotgun, right? Double barrel shotgun can kill perfectly fine. But what if I want something that can have more sustainability, but still is close range? I'm going to want to get one of those later on shotguns that have more ammo to it and are more customizable in terms of attachments. As long as the time to kill for all these weapons are universally and roughly around the same area, but instead alter the way you play, then you don't have to worry as much about power creep, and you can focus more on players' engagement and finding new ways for them to play and experience the game. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we have a bunch of Q&A piling up. So I did want to talk about one last thing and then throw you all to the Q&A batch. But in terms of social and community, when you're creating a game for an older audience, what are some of the things that you should consider when you're engaging with the player community for these experiences?
Is this for everybody?
Yes.
Well, one thing that really absolutely stands out to me, which I think is actually, it's like kind of outside the realm of gameplay. It's connected to gameplay because it's the game, but I think what was really huge community wise was offering people the ability to create. I think that's to me, that's kind of what Roblox started off as. Really, it was like it's a game, but you create in it too. For us, we have a community workshop as part of our Discord where people are able to submit their ideas of like new weapons they want in the game or a new character design that they want to have in the game. Most of the time we won't necessarily directly use the asset. We'll just use it as the idea and recreate it ourselves. Because we have a certain standard to fit. Everybody has their own style, so we have to be consistent with our game. But I think it's just fantastic just to be able to see that side of the player base, which is turning from a consumer to a creator in a way. And we end up meeting some extremely talented people like that, and we've actually onboarded quite a few people from that realm of the community to start helping us make games. And I think the quality of our games have significantly risen since doing that. It's just really good to be able to hear the input of new minds and have some fresh eyes look at things, especially when they're talented and they have skills and you can kind of hear what they have to say. Like I think it really does wonders for the game and the community at the same time, like just the development and the community interaction side of it. So that's really huge for me, at least, and that's really prevalent with those aged up games.
Yeah.
Social media in general is one of the worst things ever, but one of the most required tools in development, period.
Yeah.
Getting feedback from all sources and in different areas of the community, be it Twitter, Discord, what have you, there's so many different ways to collect information about what a player would like for the game, but it's really hard to fish out the things that are actually beneficial and the things that are just people wanting what they want in the game. When it comes to I kind of zoned a bit, so I might be a bit off topic here, but you were talking about the communication between players and devs.
Both, really.
Both.
Like I just want to talk about the social aspect of it. Yeah.
A little topic I wanted to touch on is, for example, in Arsenal, older players essentially will never interact with other people for the most part. They will usually remain silent or will say something in chat just to be silly. Whereas kids are more frequently talking to one another, more frequently insulting one another, and doing all sorts of crazy things in chat. But I think when it comes to an older audience, the thing they really like to do the most when it comes to interacting with the younger audience is, unfortunately, the older audience really likes to tick off the younger players, and that's why emote systems and stuff are so prevalent in games like, you know, Fortnite and even Arsenal. Older players really like to do the funny emote on top of dead players.
Yep. You got to fight the toxicity for sure. Speaking of toxicity, we were talking about like feedback from players as a developer. What are some tips and tricks for filtering out good and positive comments versus people just expressing how they feel about your game?
If somebody immediately defaults to saying you don't do what the community wants, they're not in your community.
Yeah.
And there's a reason I say that, because it's not because the community gets ignored, but for example, Arsenal's having this struggle with parts of its community where, specifically on Twitter, people who don't actually engage with us, they don't, for example, I live stream a lot of the work that I do. And that's a very ample and great opportunity for users to join, give feedback, give their ideas. We also host a Discord, which has like 200,000 people in it. And people are allowed to share their ideas and wants for the game there. But then you have somebody on Twitter who shows up and says, you don't want to do anything for the community when we're here in the community with an entire list provided to us of things the community wants. So you have these kind of subgroups of the whole community. For example, Tommy's Arsenal Competitive League, which is part of Arsenal, yes, but it's not the Arsenal community. It's Tommy's Competitive League community. So it's a lot of filtering out filtering out the people who genuinely interact in your community and care to engage with it, and finding the people who are just throwing offhand comments because you're not doing the one specific thing they want.
Yeah.
The loud minority perspective.
The vocal minority. Yeah.
The vocal minority, yes.
Yep. Yep, for sure. Anybody have anything else to add to that before we move on to Q&A? Nope. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Part 2 of this event, featuring audience Q&A with our developer panelists, is coming soon. So keep an eye out for it here on the Roblox Level Up YouTube channel. If you want to join in on the conversation and network with other amazing Roblox developers, join our Guilded server. We would love to see you there. Until next time.